Welcome to Gallbladder Gone, Now What? And today I am excited for this episode. So get ready for an episode that might completely flip the way you think about digestion, detox, and healing. Today we are sitting down with Karen Hurd, and her story starts in the most unexpected place, her kitchen, where a simple everyday ingredient ended up saving her daughter's life and launching one of the most powerful healing protocols in modern nutrition. She is truly an inspiration of a mother's love and the lengths we will go to for our children and how God lights the way. Karen takes us on a jaw-dropping journey into the world of bile, fiber, hormones, and the liver. And trust me, you will never look at your gallbladder the same way or your liver. She breaks down why so many of us lose our gallbladders in the first place, how bile becomes toxic, and the shocking reason soluble fiber is the missing link in healing digestion. And then she shows you exactly how this one God-given designed tool can calm inflammation, heal your hormones, protect your liver, and restore digestive rhythm to your body that it has been begging for. And no, this is not impossible, and it's so amazing. So in this episode, she gives practical, eye-opening, and honestly kind of mind-blowing information. If you've struggled with gut issues, hormone issues, and imbalances, anxiety, depression, gallbladder removal, chronic fatigue, you're about to find out why and what you can do today with ingredients you already have to finally start healing. Grab your herbal tea and let's jump in.
Gallbladder gone. Now what? Let's heal from the inside out.
Welcome to Gallbladder Gone, Now What? The podcast for Christian women navigating life after gallbladder removal. Hosted by Jamie McCrivey, holistic nutritionist, wife, boy mum, grandma, and a firm believer in God's design for lasting health. Did you know that over 1.2 million Americans have their gallbladders removed every year, and that the majority of them are women? Even more eye-opening is that all gallbladder issues are digestive issues. And poor digestion is at the root of up to 80% of all disease, including hormone imbalances and weight struggles. While Jamie isn't a doctor and this podcast isn't medical advice, she shares real solutions rooted in research, experience, and God's Word. Let's get practical, biblical, and real, one step at a time.
Hello and welcome back to Gallbladder Gone, Now What? I am here today with Karen Hurd, who is a powerhouse in nutrition and biochemistry with her career that spans military intelligence, public health, and groundbreaking wellness education. She holds a Master of Science in Biochemistry from the University of St. Joseph's, a Master of Public Health from St. George Washington University, and completed her nutrition training through the American Academy of Nutrition. Before becoming a sought-after educator and practitioner, Karen served as a U.S. Army intelligence officer, earning the Army Commendation Medal and graduating with honors from multiple elite defense programs. Today, she brings the same precision and passion to her work as a Wisconsin State Representative, a mom of 5, grandmother of 7, and the executive producer behind Scene and Hurd Productions. Karen's unique blend of science, service, and seasoned life experience makes her one of the most trusted voices in modern nutrition, and that is why I'm so excited to have you here. First of all, thank you for your service. I have 2 sons in the military, and I know how much work it is and how much you give, so thank you so much. So I wanted to start out with a little bit of introduction, and you can read this on her website, and I will put the website in the show notes, but just a brief introduction of how the story of how this kind of started with your daughter being poisoned with a household pesticide.
Sure, I can do that. So, my husband and I, after we got out of the service, he took an internship at a small church just outside of East St. Louis in Missouri, or actually it was in Illinois. And so they had prepared the parsonage for us, but they had put down new carpet that had been stored in someone else's someone's garage for a long number of years. And little unbeknownst to them and us, it was full of carpet beetles, the larvae or the eggs, which hatched into larvae and then hatched out as the
Mm,
heat came up in the winter of Illinois. Anyway, so we had they were a lot of bugs. It wasn't just, a few random. They were hundreds of thousands of them. And so we had the exterminator come in and he sprayed for it. But it's a very long story because in the military, I also was the chemical warfare defense officer for our battalion. So I knew a lot about chemical agents and what they could do to a person. And so our little girl, who was just 18 months old at the time, went into seizures. And all the symptoms that led up to it, I knew that it was a nerve agent poisoning, which happened to be the same thing that they had sprayed to kill these bugs in the
mm,
house. So she went into grand mal seizures, but they didn't last. Usually a grand mal seizure, if you have it from a fever or something, is under a minute. These were very, very long, over 10 minutes, even longer, over
oh,
an
wow.
hour. And so it was definitely a poisoning, but the doctors didn't agree that it was a poisoning. They thought it was just double pneumonia, which would be the result. That's how you actually die in nerve agent poisoning if we ever were chemically attacked by the enemy. And so I pointed all that out to them and they said, no, you don't know what you're talking about, blah, blah, blah. And anyway, she ended up in St. Louis Children's Hospital and 9 neurologists telling me you're barking up the wrong tree. This is all wrong. And I said, just do a cholinesterase level. It's a simple blood test, simple blood draw. That will show you she's been poisoned. They refused to do that. So they sent us back home on anti-seizure drugs with her, which are very strong. It was phenobarbital. And then when we got back home, she had all the same symptoms, except I knew she wouldn't seize this time because we were back in the same house, in the same environment. And she had the exact same symptoms. It's pinpoint pupils. I could go through the symptoms, but it doesn't really matter. And I knew that she would die. She wouldn't go into a seizure because she was on such a huge amount of phenobarbital and
Mm-hmm.
called loading doses. And so I just took her out of the parsonage and we left. And I said, I got to get to the bottom of this. So I ended up calling poison control centers from all over the country. And they said, we've never heard of this before. We don't know. By that time, I'd already contacted the exterminator. I said, what is the name of the Dursban 2E, is what they sprayed. And I said, that is chlorpyrifos. Is that correct? That's yes. And I said, that's a nerve agent. And they said, yes, of course. How do you think we kill the bugs? It's a nerve agent. And so I continued to call poison controls and finally got a hold of someone in Corvallis at the university there that was a child toxicologist. And he said, absolutely, she could have been poisoned. Why hasn't your physicians done a cholinesterase level? And I
Oh,
said, I
gosh.
tried to get them to do that, but they wouldn't. He said, give me the name of your physician immediately, which I did. Send the carpet to me to be tested because I wanted it to be tested to see what the levels of the chlorpyrifos were in the carpet because they sprayed every square inch of the carpet because the beetles were everywhere. Anyway, and the lab in St. Louis wanted a large amount of money to recalibrate their instruments. My husband is an intern at a church. We had no money, zero
Mm-hmm.
money.
Yeah.
And so we didn't have the money. He said, he said, cut a sample of the carpet out of the floor, send it to me on dry ice. I have a lab at my university. I will test it here. Anyway, did all that stuff, took her in for the doctor called after I hung up the phone from Dr. Sheldon Wagner in Corvallis at the university there. Within 30 minutes, I had a call from our doctor there that was in the St. Louis area. Said, would you bring Ruth in? Ruth is the name of my 18-month-old daughter for a cholinesterase level. So I've only been begging to do that, for days and days. Anyway, cholinesterase level was positive. She'd been poisoned. The testing came back from the university, the lab that Dr. Sheldon Wagner did, that it was over 100 times the strength of what was considered safe and normal, the chlorpyrifos in the carpet. EPA of Illinois had to come in. We ripped out all the carpet. They had to haul it by special waste carrier to a hazardous waste facility. They had to have air sniffers in there to make sure all of it was cleared out because it was such a high concentration. The company that made the Dursban 2E, which was Monsanto, they had to withdraw all of that and do a recall on that entire batch. It was a really big deal. Anyway, and so by this time, Ruth is almost dead. So my
Yeah.
daughter is extremely ill. She didn't have to be on the phenobarbital anymore because she wasn't exposed. Her double pneumonia had cleared up, but it had completely damaged her liver. Her liver enzymes were off the chart. And I was told she had less than just a few weeks to live because her liver was failing, because the poison had just destroyed her liver. And so I took her to specialists in Chicago, St. Louis. We conferred on the phone with specialists in Dallas, Texas. What could we do to save this little girl that had been overwhelmingly poisoned by this organophosphate chlorpyrifos? This is an organophosphate. And they all said the same thing. There's nothing that can be done. You just need to accept that this is what's going to happen. And I remember being in the specialist office in St. Louis, and he said, Mrs. Hurd, we've never watched anyone die of organophosphate poisoning before and how it destroys the liver. We would like to do every, weekly and regular biopsies of her liver until she passes so that we can see how the liver changes in this poisoning. And it would be really great for medical research.
Oh,
Liver biopsies are very painful. This is an
yeah.
18-month-old. And I said, you give me no hope and you want to use her as a medical experiment. And I left. I said, I'm done. I'm leaving.
Yeah.
I'm not coming back. You guys have nothing to offer me anymore. I went to the university there in St. Louis, downtown St. Louis. It's called Washington U. It's a medical university. Washington University. My undergrad degree is in Spanish. Okay. And I know nothing about all these medical terms. And, now I can whip off organophosphate and say that it's, chlorpyrifos and all that. But that's all since education that I've gained since that time. But that time I had a degree in Spanish and I'd served in the U.S. military and I knew what I did from my in learning that I did when I was a chemical warfare defense officer for our battalion. So I went to the library which is open to the public, and I'm the public. And I said, I don't know anything about anything about something called chlorpyrifos. I don't know anything about the liver and how it can be rebuilt. And they said, well, here's the whole library. It's a massive library, massive. And they said, just, look up under, some keywords.
Mhm.
And this is before Google. This is 1989, December of 89 and January of 1990. There was no Google search, there's no
Mhm.
AI. This is microfiche. I don't know if you,
Oh, I remember microfiche and how incredibly inefficient it is.
So I started looking up keywords and then it would refer to this medical journal that had this keyword and you look it up on microfiche. So I spent many days in that library. My husband took care of, we had two other children and Ruth, who was so sick and she was fading by the day. I mean, it was very apparent she was dying. Is there any answer anywhere? And everybody telling me there's nothing, nothing. I read everything from every snake oil remedy that there is currently out there to the latest in the NIH research, the National Institutes of Health Research. And I learned enough about a system called the enterohepatic recirculation. It has to do with how you recirculate things basically at 90. At that point, it was 90% in the literature. Since then, the literature has been updated, it's now 95% that we recycle toxins at 95%. They just keep retracing our bloodstream over and over and over again. And it occurred to me, no one's suggesting this in the literature. It just occurred to me, if I could somehow clear that, if we could just get that chlorpyrifos from recirculating all the time, if we could get it out of her system and maybe her liver could regenerate. And, so then I studied, well, where is this, how do we do that? So what can you bind up with bile? Because I learned about bile because that's part of the enterohepatic recirculation. What will throw it away? And I learned about something called soluble fiber. And so I thought, what's soluble fiber found? It's found in beans. So I began to feed her beans, but there wasn't enough. She wasn't eating at that time. She was very sick. So she wasn't even eating. She wasn't doing anything. It's just lying basically listless and, nothing that could be done. And so you can get psyllium as a soluble fiber too. And I would mix that up and you have to have it in a liquid because it absorbs lots of liquid. Anyway, I gave that to her in an oral syringe. I forced her to take it, like you give it a medicine, you force this down the throat and an oral syringe. And I did that many, many times a day. And she began to recover, Jamie. She began to recover and she started to get better. And a week went by and 2 weeks went by and then she was significantly better. And then the doctors, because there's still physicians involved, they recognize that she's improving. Her liver enzymes are improving. Everything is improving. And by a course of several weeks, she was completely well from all appearances and everything had returned to normal, all of her labs and tests. And they said, whatever you're doing, Mrs. Hurd, we're very happy. Just keep doing it. I said, you want me to tell you about the enterohepatic? And they said, no. They just pat you on the head like a dog, and say, I'm glad it's all going well. Just keep doing what you're doing.
Isn't it crazy that they don't want to know? They don't want to be educated. It's crazy to me.
It is. There are some that I think that do. I think they're such busy people because I'm a very busy person now. It's
Mhm.
just like I don't have time to learn about that. And this wasn't in my schooling. And I'm in the traditional medicine, and this is the way we deal with this. Whatever.
Yeah.
I can make excuses for them, but they that was the end of it. So now we just have to live our lives and raise Ruth. And then it wasn't very long after that I'm starting to get phone calls from people saying, "Hey, what could you help me with my daughter? Could you help me with my son, my husband, my father, my mother, my brother, my sister?" And I said, "I'm sorry, I don't know anything about this. I have an undergrad degree in Spanish. I'm not a nurse. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a researcher. I don't know." They said, "Well, we read about you in the newspaper." I said, "What? Read about me in the newspaper?" What newspaper? Well, the St. Louis Globe Democrat, which is there are two newspapers at that time, the Post Dispatch and the Globe Democrat. And then I get this little article that's sent to me, and it's a tiny little article that says, "Little girl destined to die lives." And it's just a little short synopsis about this little girl that was supposed to die and didn't. And they had my name, and somehow there's no phone number, there's no contact data. It's just this little short snippet.
Yeah.
And
And
people are
they figured
resourceful.
it out. Yeah.
They found me.
Yeah.
You've got a name, and it was in the Globe Democrat, so you're somewhere in the St. Louis area.
Yeah.
And so they found me, and they started calling me, and I said, "I don't know anything about it." And they said, "Please, no doctor's been able to help us. They're dying. They're really whatever." The
Mhm.
stories will break your heart. They're just terrible. And I said, "Well, I can go down to the Washington University Library. I've gotten to know it pretty well now, and I can look up things on microfiche really well now, and I can look up and read. But if I tell you something to do, the only tools I have are food. That's all I have. I have no medications. I have no neat biometric tools. I have nothing. Just all I could tell you is how you should eat or shouldn't eat based on what I'll learn about how whatever it is the problem was."
Yeah.
And so I did that. And then these people, and I said, "And you can't hold me accountable. I know nothing. I I have no credentials. So, I'm just telling you, and the things I'm telling him to do is to eat food. It's not go take a drug, go take a
Mhm.
supplement, go take anything. It's just like, could you eat this instead of eat that? So there's their choices. None of the stuff I ask them to eat are toxic. I mean, it's just go to the grocery store and what you're buying at the regular grocery store. And so people started to get better, and more people called. And then it wasn't not many months after that, then I had the St. Louis Catholic Parish. It's a very Catholic town, and they have a lot of Catholic schools. And they said, "Would you come and speak at our parent teachers meeting about health for children?" And then I had the Drury Inn say, "Would you do brown bag seminar?" They had a lot of Drury Inns. It's a hotel chain. "Would you do a brown bag seminar to our employees?" And then I had one Bell Telephone, which is Southwestern Bell Telephone, call me, and they have the largest skyscraper in St. Louis at that time, where they were situated with thousands of employees. And they said, "We have had multiple requests for you to come and do a brown bag seminar." And they want this repeated. So I went and did one, and that their auditorium was full of 300 people that they had
Mhm.
in that tower, and it was always stuffed. And they say, "Would you come back in a month and do another and another?" And I said, "Well, what topic do you want me to talk about? Because I have to go down to the university and research it and study and think, well, if I had PMS, or if I had menopause, or if I had heart disease, what would I do to tell you to eat or not eat?" And
Mhm.
so that's the way it went. I continued to get all kinds of speaking engagements, and then finally the University of Missouri asked me to begin teaching nutrition classes. And I said, "I don't even have a degree." They said, "We know. We've
Mhm.
investigated you. We know. But would you like to teach? We'd like you to teach at the university." And they said, "And would you get a degree? Because we really
Okay.
need you to have a degree." So that's when I enrolled in the American Academy of Nutrition. And then I studied, got my degree. And then, anyway, so the rest is history. And then I went on to get a master's in biochemistry, a master's in public health, and been practicing for over 30 years.
That's an amazing story because I think that it gives women also that hope when you're a mother and your child is sick, you just prove that you'll go through any length to do what you can to help, and so a lot of our women that listen to this have been feeling sick for a long time, and they've lost their gallbladders and they're told by their doctors, and this is what I was told is, oh, just go live your life normally. Don't really only thing is don't eat fat. And but that doesn't make sense, right? Because we need vitamins A, D, E, and K. So from practicing, why do you think it has become so common for people to lose their gallbladder?
It's because the traditional medical society, which is dealing with the vast majority of people, when I say vast, I don't even know what percentage to put on it, but probably somewhere around 99%,
Mm-hmm.
they are recommending gallbladder removal instead of treating it in a different way. And it's because they don't know. They don't know that there's another way. Currently in medical schools, to they get about less than 2 minutes on the enterohepatic recirculation.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're in medical school, you learn about anatomy, physiology, pharmaceuticals. I mean, there's a whole long list of classes that they have to take. But when they cover the enterohepatic recirculation, it's usually 1 or 2 slides in one class that is less than 5 minutes for their entire medical career. That's the end of it. So they
Yeah.
don't know. So you can't practice something you don't know, that you haven't experienced. And so even though, because now we have social media and we have different ways to, communicate, some of that is changing, most especially just recently is changing, into pushing for more alternatives and, giving alternatives. Like maybe there's something here that if you're not a part of the traditional allopathic medicine, that, there still could be some validity and some other things. So that's why people, they don't know that they have an option unless they hear about it from a friend that heard about, hey, Karen Hurd has done this, or I've heard people that use solve, they haven't heard
Mm-hmm.
that. And that's really why.
Yeah. And this is something that develops over time, right? It's not something one day you wake up and you're like, "Oh, I'm hurting and it's down and it's not working." And so what would you say is would you say that adding beans every day to your diet is the most powerful tool or one of your powerful tools?
It is probably the most powerful tool. If you would just eat beans and you needed them 3 times a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, just have some soluble fiber there. I'd love for you to get rid of your sugar and your caffeine and your all the rest of the things that cause a lot of other health issues.
Hmm.
But just eat the soluble fiber. We worry so much about, oh, what if I get glycophosphates, from, the way they grow food? What if I get some BHT from the cans? What about the PFAS, that's in the
Hmm.
water that's, or in soil or whatever it is? Guys, if we were eating soluble fiber 3 times a day, all that stuff is so easily cleared and it's thrown away. It's just thrown into the toilet in the form of a bowel movement. It's all gone. And we get so bogged down into our exposure to things, but quite frankly, we're exposed to things and we will never be able to stop 100% of the exposure that we have to toxins that can harm us over time. So how
Yeah,
about we just be preventative and just eat your beans? It's just a half a cup. Eat a half a cup of beans at breakfast, half a cup at lunch, and half a cup at dinner. It's that simple.
I
And
love
then
that.
you prevent huge amounts of health problems.
And it's
Huge.
and it's not expensive and it's delicious, right? Because I remember when I first heard your message, I was like, done. I love beans. I can do this. But there's something that I'm sure everyone is asking is like, what if you're not digesting it well? Or when I was really sick, um, so let's do that. What if if you don't digest them well, you're getting gas, you're getting bloating, all of these things. Number two is what if they kind of sit in your stomach? Like I remember for me when I first started trying to do the half a cup that because I love beans and I love to put them on things, but I 3 times a day. What would your suggestions be to that?
First of all, I will address, do they cause gas or not? Actually, gas is caused by a fermentation process in the gut
Mhm.
and it's set off by hormones. It's not set off by beans. Because the people who say I get gas when I eat beans, I can guarantee you they already have gas. They have gas when they eat anything.
Mm-hmm.
So it's because gas is being caused by hormones in the gut that trigger a fermentation process instead of the normal digestive enzyme process. We're digesting foods through fermentation. And fermentation 100% of the time will cause the production of CH4, which is methane gas.
Okay.
You're going to have gas. Period. 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 You will. So your issue really isn't, well, you it's anything that you're eating is going to give you gas. Why are beans even more seems to cause it more than your broccoli. Broccoli causes it worse than beans, or say your bread or whatever else you're eating.
Hmm.
It's because it has something called saponins, and saponins make these. It's like a soap-like complex that keeps gas trapped in bubbles. You've
Okay.
seen soap bubble.
Yeah.
Well, what makes a bubble? Well, there's some type of gas inside the bubble. And so those bubbles get caught in your gut, and then that's painful because you have this big bubble moving through the gut, and then it causes bloating and painfulness. And then until you pass the gas or burp it up, either
Hmm.
way, then it's uncomfortable. So the problem really isn't that beans cause gas. You already have a problem that's creating gas in your life, and that needs to be corrected. So to be specific in answering your question, if you feel like, oh, I cannot go through this digestive, discomfort in eating the beans, then start with one bean, just one. And when you could
Okay.
eat one bean 3 times a day, and you say, I ate one bean today, 3 times a day, didn't bother me at all. Good, you're
Hmm.
ready for two. And
Okay.
when you can eat 2 3 times a day, you're ready for three, and so on until now you're at a whole tablespoon. Now you're at 2 tablespoons. Now you're at 4 tablespoons, and a half a cup is 8 tablespoons. You're at 8 tablespoons of beans 3 times a day. And you just work your way up into it because every little bit of bean that you eat is going to carry out the hormones, because hormones, where are they coming from? They're in the bile. They're in the bile that's coming into your gut because hormones are fat soluble. Anything that's fat soluble is going to be cleared through that bile, through that enterohepatic recirculation pattern that I mentioned briefly before. And so you're going to clear a little bit of that hormone. And you don't want all your hormones to recycle. That's what's causing breast cancer, cervical cancer. That's what's causing prostate cancer. It's one of the number one causes of cancer. It's a recirculation of our hormones. We need to be throwing them away. They're also causing the gas. So we get rid of it just a little bit at a time. Because every
Okay.
time you take even a partial of a gram of soluble fiber, you got rid of a little bit of those toxins that are recycling, including
Okay.
the hormone.
That sounds good enough. And then, what about like, so that the same protocol if it's kind of just sitting there, if we're having to kind of get that digestion rolling, it's the same process.
You
Okay.
have to do the same.
Now, people are going to say, and this is, I don't, this is interesting, is that we shouldn't have beans because of the anti-nutrients in them. What is your thoughts for that?
It is, again, and we're back to our media. Our media is saying there's anti-nutrients in beans, there's anti-nutrients in everything, because everything that grows from the ground has phthalates in them, has oxalates in them. All of these things have the same, anything growing from the ground. So I guess we better not eat anything anymore.
Mhm.
And
Right,
people don't
that's how it
understand.
feels.
Yeah. What are you going to do? Live off of air? I mean, and they also, and they have never studied what is the function of these these phthalates. What is the function of oxalates? They actually have a function. They actually are very essential in our DNA and our RNA construction. They're very essential in the communication of the immune system to other one white blood cell to the other white blood cell to keep you healthy. So they've got this unfortunately they've been demonized
Uh-huh.
by well-meaning, and I'm going to use this term, and I use it all the time. They're well-intentioned dragons. They are
Hmm.
breathing out fire that is actually destroying people's good health, but they're well-intentioned. We've all met people like that. They're very well-intentioned, telling you how you need to live your life and what you need to do, what you need to eat, by the way, what you need to think. I mean, you everywhere in everyone's life, you have people telling you how you need to think and what you need to do. That's just life. Welcome to
Yeah.
humanity. And
Yeah.
they're very well intentioned, and they're very passionate, and they believe what they say, and they publish articles, and do some research. I have done so much research. You probably already gained that just to save my little girl's life, but it didn't stop there with helping other people. I have been a researcher since that moment, and I have carried that throughout my life. And I'm always just like, oxalates are bad? Let me read this. First of all, they're cooked away when you cook beans. They're almost all completely cooked away. So have you taken into account? Nobody eats a raw bean and break your teeth off. You
Yeah.
have to soak them in oil and they have to become soft. So first of all, you lost most of the quote anti-nutrients, but is there a place in the human anatomy and physiology biochemically for these chemicals that we're utilizing? Oh, yes, ma'am. They are vital, and without them, we will die. So it's just like, do a little bit further research. And I'm not blaming people, because people just read what comes across their social media feed or whatever they're doing.
Hmm.
And it's a quick read. You read the topic. Oh, beans are bad. Take a little time to research this. And I
Yeah.
think you will be quite surprised.
I love that you say that because I'm a researcher and I go deep. And so when someone says
Good for you.
something, I'm like, let me go do that. And I teach over at the college right now. And I'm always telling my students, do not believe everything you hear or read. Go find out about it, research it. Because again, well-meaning people, and sometimes some unwell-meaning people or organizations, and so we need to take that into account and be smart about the choices we make. So another question is, do you feel like there's some beans are better than others? Do you hierarchy them, or is it just whatever you love?
No, there's not one bean that's better than another. So it's whether you like black beans, garbanzo beans, lentils, which are a type of bean. They're the soluble fiber, they're a legume. It's whatever you like the most. Because if some people say, well, this bean has this much more soluble fiber than that bean. I all I can do is encourage you to research it. I have researched this ad nauseum about, does a black bean have more? What about a lentil? But the problem is when we put these in a lab and we test how much soluble fiber is, we're testing a batch that came from this farmer's field. And where was this bean grown? Was it on the northern slope? Was it on the southern slope? Was it grown during a time of summer that we had little sunshine and more rain? Or did we have more sunshine with less rain? All of those things impact the amount of soluble fiber in a bean because soluble fiber comes from the breaking down of insoluble fiber. Like, let's take a pea. We all know what peas are. Garden peas that we harvest. That's one of the first things almost that we harvest in the spring.
Hmm.
English pea. And they are at that time a vegetable. They are mostly insoluble fiber. You will know that because the shell when you strip them out, the shell's fairly thick. It's not thick. But if you left those peas on the vine and you did not pick them and let them stay all the way to autumn, then that shell would get dry and brown and papery thin. And inside, those little peas would get dried up, and then all their insoluble fiber has almost completely been converted to soluble fiber. And it's only soluble fiber that can bind with our bile that's carrying out these fat soluble wastes, like I mentioned, glycophosphates and the PFAS, and then your hormones or fat soluble waste. It's only soluble fiber that's going to carry out the bile that's carrying these things that need to be discarded. Insoluble fiber will not carry out not one micelle. Micelle is a fat molecule that's what bile is composed of. Will not carry out one micelle of bile. You have to have soluble fiber. And so that's the type of bean doesn't matter because you can't say, well, I am certain, I've seen it, I looked it up. Pinto beans have this much. Well, that batch of pinto beans did. Okay. But if you touched another batch of pinto beans from a farm in another state that had different exposures to wind and sun and rain and weathering, you will have a different amount of soluble fiber. So the best thing to do is just assume that a half a cup of lentils, black beans, garbanzo beans, kidney beans, name the bean, it has 5 grams of soluble fiber in a half a cup. That's just the easy way to do it.
Okay.
Because otherwise, it might have a little more, it might have a little less.
But if
Depends.
you're consistent,
So it's not worth it.
yeah.
Yeah, and it's not worth arguing over because you're still going to have enough soluble fiber that you're going to be able to get the effect that you wanted to get.
Yeah, absolutely. And so because this is a podcast about women and gallbladders and liver, what can we expect? What is happening when we're eating beans as daily, and let's say 3 times a day, and to our bile and liver health?
Okay. What happens is that the liver is always clearing your bloodstream of anything that's fat soluble, whether it's a toxin or whether it's a hormone. Hormones are not normally considered toxins. Hormones are catalysts that cause chemical reactions to happen in the human body. Estrogen, progesterone. We're talking about women, so I'll mention those two hormones. Estrogen and progesterone are absolutely vital to a woman having a cycle, being fertile, having a baby. And these hormones, anything that's fat soluble, is cleared out of your bloodstream by the liver. The liver then places these things into a digestive fluid called bile, which travels from the liver down through biliary ducts into the gallbladder. And bile not only is a trash truck for the liver clearing out excess hormones, it will only clear out the excess hormones that you need. And all of the BH, T and the BPA and all of the toxins, everything that you can think of, including organophosphates, poisonous things that poison my little girl Ruth. all those things are placed in the bile, but the bile has a second purpose. It is a fat, and only fats can digest fats. There is nothing else that will digest a fat except another fat. And that's just pure chemistry. And any chemist listening to this will go, oh, yeah, I learned that. That was in Chem 101. Okay. You're not going to have a water soluble substance be able to dissolve a fat. You have to have another fat with less hydrogen ions on the molecule to be able to digest or dissolve or break down another fat. So the bile is a fat carrying fat-soluble toxins and waste, and it lands into your duodenum. The duodenum is just underneath your sternum and above your belly button. And it will then travel down. It digests the fats that you eat. It will travel down through the rest of the small colon, which is the jejunum and the ileum. And at the terminal part of the ileum, just before you cross into large colon, all fats are absorbed. Because once you get in large colon, there's no fat being absorbed. There's nothing being absorbed except for water. And so all the fats are being absorbed at the terminal part of the ileum. How much of the fat is being absorbed? All the good fats you ate, all the good fish fats you ate. Think of the good olive oil, whatever you ate. Those fats are going to be absorbed here at the terminal part of the ileum. But what about the bile? Because I thought bile was a fat, and it would help break into smaller pieces because fatty acids are very long chains, molecular chains. What about the bile itself? Because it's a fat, will it be reabsorbed? Yes, it will. How much? 95% of your bile will be reabsorbed, will go back into your bloodstream. Well, what about all those excess hormones we were trying to get rid of, or all that PFAS, or all of the glycophosphates, or all the stuff, all the bad stuff we're trying to get rid of? What happens to that? It goes back into the bloodstream too, because it's bound up into the molecule. These are molecular bonds that are holding these things captive. And it all goes back and retraces your bloodstream. All those hormones retracing your bloodstream, all those poisons retracing your bloodstream. And the liver clears it out again and puts it in the bile again. And as the years go on, day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, your toxin load in your bloodstream is building, 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 building until at some point you're going to have some disease, something from all this trash that continues to recycle because it doesn't ever go away. You're always recycling 95% of it. So the answer is we have to find something that will bind with this bile and cause it to cross through that ileocecal valve and not be absorbed at the terminal part of the ileum and go into the large colon where eventually it'll be dumped into the toilet in the form of a bowel movement. There's only one thing that does that, and that is soluble fiber, which is found in beans. It's also found in vegetables and oatmeal, but not even in an amount that's close to what it should be. I mean, in vegetables, in a cup of vegetables, you have 1/2 of 1 gram. In a cup of oatmeal, you have 2 grams. In a cup of cooked oatmeal, in a cup of cooked beans, you have 10 in a cup. It's just like there's no comparison. Why are we fooling around with, saying I'm eating my vegetables, they're full of soluble fiber. Garbage are not full of soluble fiber. They're full of insoluble fiber, which has another purpose altogether, but it won't do anything to help your liver and to help your gallbladder. So what happens is when we start to eat soluble fiber in the duodenum, when this bile is released from the gallbladder into your duodenum, it will bind. And this is a binding that cannot be broken. These micelles, these biomolecules that are carrying all this trash are bound permanently into this soluble fiber. They will travel down through the small intestine, get to the ileocecal area in the small colon, and there the fat will say, hey, I have to disengage because I'm a fat and fats absorb here. And the soluble fiber says, what are you thinking about? You and I are bound together permanently. We're married, and there is no such word as divorce. I'm going into the toilet because 100% of fiber, 100% of soluble fiber, insoluble fiber, all of it is excreted into the toilet. And I'm crossing the ileocecal valve, going into the large colon, and we are going into the toilet together in the form of a bowel movement. You throw that bile away, and then none of those toxins are going to re-enter the bloodstream. And then the liver is always making new bile. And then the liver makes new bile, which doesn't have that hydrogen ion concentration. So if you had gallstones, you have inflammation of the lining of the gallbladder, you have biliary sludge. That's just, it's bile that's getting thicker and thicker. And it's getting thicker and thicker. People who study chemistry will know it gets thicker and thicker when you add more and more hydrogen ions. And so that it gets into a place where it gets so thick, it rolls into little stones. We call them gallstones. Well, how do we dissolve those? Can you? Sure. Run fresh bile that has not many hydrogen ions attached to it. and then it will run over the top of those stones and it will take a few of those hydrogen ions off that stone and take it with you into your duodenum where will you be a soluble fiber and you get thrown away. And as you continue to eat these soluble fiber, these beans, then your stones will decrease and decrease and decrease in size till they have dissolved 100%. They're gone. The inflammation of your gallbladder wall will stop. Why is it inflamed? Because people don't understand the more hydrogen ions that you add to any fat, it makes it more acidic. If you don't know what acid does, take some hydrochloric acid, pour it in the palm of your hand, it will strip your skin off.
Yeah.
You can't be exposed to high levels of go ahead, acid.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, so some people are struggling with constipation. Will the beans help the constipation?
Beans aren't the answer to constipation. I mean, they regulate stool. They stop diarrhea. They don't add to constipation. The only way they would add to constipation if you didn't get enough water. And
Okay.
that's just people who take psyllium. I run into this all the time because they'll say, I don't want to do the beans, I want to do psyllium. Psyllium is a soluble fiber substitute that you can use. It's the only one you can use. You can't use wheat dextrin. You can't use gar gum. All the rest of them will not have the power that psyllium does. But they don't take enough water with it. Or you're eating beans, but you're only getting 2 8-ounce glasses of water a day. It's like, what are you doing? You've got to have enough water. And so things get gummed up. What moves the bowels is fats. And so women who are, I know this is a gallbladder broadcast. Women who don't have a gallbladder or struggling with gallstones or gallbladder pain, they're avoiding fats and should be. And the reason they're avoiding them is because whenever they eat a fat, you have to release more of this bile. And so because the more fat you eat, the more bile you're going to release because bile is what's going to digest that fat.
Yep.
And so when that bile is trying to squeeze out through a blocked biliary duct that you got a stone in, it is incredibly painful and excruciatingly painful. And so we're going to avoid fats, which you need to until we can dissolve the stones. But it's the fat that makes your stools easy to pass. That fat that's bound up in the bile that goes into the large colon, it's fat that makes stools soft and easy to pass. So in the meantime, we're going to eat the beans and we're just going to drink enough water with it if you have a gallbladder problem at the moment. If you don't have a gallbladder problem, you don't have to worry about it. You can eat fat.
Okay, so the kind of the protocol with the beans is have the beans work up to having beans 3 times a day, about a half cup, making sure we drink enough water and avoiding fat with it until we've fixed that gallbladder problem if we have a gallbladder. But if we don't have a gallbladder, is there anything other than just getting it in and making sure that poison and toxin just doesn't keep recirculating?
Yeah, and yes, I won't answer that question, but the first one I want to address is if you have a gallbladder problem. When I said to eat beans 3 times a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, that's for a healthy person. That's for all people. If you have a gallbladder problem right now, 1, discontinue all fats, period, stop. 2, you must eat beans. If you are in terrible pain, you have to eat them every hour, just 1 spoonful. Because your bile is not recycling 3 times a day. It's recycling 20, 30, 40, up to 70 times a day. So every time if you can eat beans frequently, you're throwing out your bile faster, which forces the liver to make new bile, which, by the way, is made out of your bad cholesterol. And you also lower your cholesterol by healing your gallbladder. And then so you make the new bile, which has the capacity then to dissolve. That's what you have to have. You have to have a less dense hydrogen fat to digest your intense hydrogen fats. And so that's the way to solve it. So if you have a gallbladder problem right now, you need to eat beans frequently. If it's not a bad gallbladder problem, it's just like, I got some occasional twins. It's just 6 times a day, but not a half a cup a day, 6 times, or a half a cup of each serving, a quarter cup 6 times a day.
Okay.
And if you say, I'm in constantly, then you're going to eat them every hour. Just give me a tablespoon every hour. Give me a tablespoon or 2. That's it. And then the second question, now that I talked so much on that one, the second question was, Jamie, what did you ask me?
Is there anything, since we don't have a gallbladder, is there anything to do on top of that, of the regular?
Yeah. If you don't have a gallbladder and you have never eaten beans before, you need to go ahead and you need to eat them 6 times a day at a quarter cup. And if you have to work up to that, work up to that. And then eventually you'll just do them a half a cup 3 times a day. It depends on how much fat you're eating, but fats you're going to have to eventually reintroduce into your life. We will
Mhm.
make fats on our own. We can make fats out of carbohydrates. Our body does that all the time. So you're not going to say, oh, I didn't get any fat in my life, so I'm going to die. No, you won't. Your body will produce fat for you. It does that easily in the liver. So you don't have to panic about that. But I mean, it is nice to be able to have salad dressing on your salad, and
Yeah.
that's a fat.
Yeah, a little bit
Or
of avocado because I remember that even that would hurt me when
a
I was
bit of
struggling.
avocado. So, I mean, it's fixable. Even if you don't have a gallbladder, you're fixable. If you have your gallbladder, keep it and then start to do the right things to fix it. So,
Yeah.
I have a whole course on this on my website. I
Yeah.
have an entire course on how to fix a gallbladder.
I love that. Now where you're saying have these beans, let's say let's focus on the 3 times a day. It's weird to think to have beans for breakfast. So I was thinking breakfast, you could do soups for lunch and dinner and on your salads and stuff like that. What are your favorite ways to get this in 3 times a day?
I just eat them. I just eat them. I just open a can. I'm a very busy lady. And so I open a can, I rinse off any sauce because the sauces have oftentimes junk in them. I don't want in them anyway. And that also has the saffrons in them. And I just eat them plain. And I don't know where your listening audience is, but this is the United States that I live in.
Hmm.
And it's because our culture says that. I just was in Ireland just a few weeks ago. And do you know what they have every morning for breakfast in the hotel every morning for breakfast? Beans. I have many clients that live in the United Kingdom and they have beans every morning for breakfast. We're one of the few countries who don't have beans for breakfast. So it's just a cultural thing we have in our head, you
Yeah,
know.
I've lived in China and I lived in England for a bit, and it's like beans are all over the place, just like and beans for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And so, but we're used to those sweet breakfasts, right? And so if we change to that savory breakfast, I've even heard people say they just have lentil soup in the morning, a plain just lentil
Yep,
soup, and then maybe something fancier during the day. Um,
yep.
so, is there anything, do you have any like words of hope or success stories of someone maybe you've worked with that who has not had a gallbladder who's restored their health that you could share with us?
Anybody that is struggling with gallbladder, let me tell you, there is hope. I have been doing this job for over 30 years now, and I haven't worked with 10 or 15 or 20 people that have gallbladder problems or that are on the brink of having their gallbladder removed. Have been to the doctor and they've said, we need to remove your gallbladder. That just came out of the ER saying they're going to remove my gallbladder because I was in such pain. And they contact me, that's scheduled for day after tomorrow. It's like, wait, wait. Every one of them Every one of them gets well, not some of it. And it's not 20. I'm talking about hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of people. I have tens of thousands of clients at this point, and I have done this with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people with gallbladder. Every one of them will get well if you're willing to do these things. Where you don't get well, it's like, I'm not going to eat beans. I'm going to keep doing what I want to do. And then that's their choice. You get to do whatever you want to do,
Yeah.
but they all get well. Let me give you a story. There's a woman and she came to see me. She came to see me because she had gallbladder problems. And they were threatening to take out her gallbladder. She's in excruciating pain, whenever she would eat fat or, whatever. And I said, and I take a very complete history. And she also had been infertile for years. She's in her 30s now. And she and her husband been trying for years upon years to have a child. And they never had a child. And I said, okay, this is what we're going to do to correct your gallbladder. I said, and then I just want to give you another piece here that you need to know. As you do this protocol that I'm giving you to heal your gallbladder, which will heal your gallbladder, you need to know that you're going to become fertile. And she says, no, I will never become fertile. I've been doing this for years. We've tried to have a child. I said, well, every symptom that you've given me is that you're an overproducer of estrogen. You've told me every symptom of being an overproducer of estrogen. And I said that overproduction of estrogen also added to your gallbladder problems because that estrogen is being cleared through your gallbladder, but you're recycling 95% of it. And that's what's kept you infertile. I said, so I just want to tell you, if you don't want to have children, I know you're in your 30s now. If you don't want to have children, then you're going to need to use some type of, intervention to prevent becoming pregnant because you're going to become pregnant as you heal your gallbladder. She said, no way, I don't believe you. I said, that's fine. I just wanted to give you fair warning so that you don't come back to me and say, we didn't want a kid and now I'm pregnant,
Yeah.
So she followed the gallbladder protocol. Her gallbladder completely healed. And guess what? She got pregnant.
Oh, I
And they
love
had their first child. And then now they had a second, and now they've had a third. Now she's in her 40s, and now they got 3 children,
Yeah.
and they're very, very happy.
I love that.
So,
Thank you so much because, as women who have gone to kind of walk through this path, just similar to your story with your daughter, we're just told, there's nothing you can do. You're going to kind of feel sick for a while, like, or they tell you it's in your head. You should be perfectly fine. You can live fine without your gallbladder. And but there's a problem that's happened that led up to the gallbladder. So we have to fix the liver. We have to start getting those toxins out and stuff. So I love that you give just such simple protocols to heal, and it's doable, and it's delicious, and it's not expensive, and it makes me so grateful for your work and for you coming and talking with us today. And is there anything else that you have to say before we say goodbye to each other?
yes, if anyone ever says this to you that it's in your head, this is not true, then you need to find a different practitioner to help you. It's not in our heads. And if you say, well, I have mental issues and I have anxiety and I might be dreaming this up. If you have anxiety, you are overproducing adrenaline, very specifically epinephrine and norepinephrine. And that's what's making you anxious and making you have all these thoughts. And we can get rid of that by eating the beans too, because guess which organ clears that out of the bloodstream? Your liver puts it in the bile, goes down the gastrointestinal tract, and you're recycling 95% of that adrenaline, which keeps you on edge like a cat on a hot tin roof. And you're dreaming up all these worrisome things. It's not in your head. There is a physiological reason for the way you feel mentally, physically. All of that is tied to your physical state. So if someone is telling you that, find a different practitioner
I
and get
love
help.
that. Thank you so much. I actually used the beans to help a client who was having panic attacks,
Yep.
and it stopped them, and she uses beans all the time now. And again, thank you for taking the time out of your day to educate us and to spend time with us. We really appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
I hope today's episode reminded you just how wisely God designed your body. What Karen shared is exactly the kind of simple, powerful food-based protocol I help women apply every day. If you're thinking, I need this kind of support for my own digestion hormones, I'd love to invite you to work with me one-on-one. We'll use God's foods and God's wisdom because He knows best how your body heals. You don't have to do this alone. Your body is designed for restoration, and I'm here to help you step into it. So until next time, happy digesting.
If this episode encouraged you or offered practical insight, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Leaving a review, subscribing, and sharing with even one friend helps more people discover this message, and Jamie is truly grateful for your support. Be sure to check the show notes for free downloads, helpful resources, and a link to join Jamie's private Facebook group for extra support and community that blends practical health with biblical truth. Just a reminder, Jamie isn't a doctor, so always consult your healthcare provider before making changes to your health plan.